and that is a bad thing. So I just want to make sure that it is clear. If you have been spending most of your time in blame mode, the first and most important thing to do to get out of blame mode is to not blame yourself. Right? Because the natural response of someone who lives in blame mode to realizing that blame mode is wrong is to say, I'm such a jerk, I'm in blame mode all the time. Right? So the first step is to not blame yourself. Probably should have said that to begin with. And we lost him. I was about to finish the answer, and so she can get the rest of the answer when she comes back. It's dealing with, if you realize that you're in blame mode, there's a short-term solution and a long-term solution. The short-term solution is just figuring out that you are in blame mode right now. And as we will see, that mostly consists of managing anger or fear. So if we wind up talking about how to control your temper, I have a really, really bad temper, so I can talk to you a lot about what I've had to go through to learn to control my temper. In short term, getting out of blame mode consists largely of getting your temper under control. In the long term, look, solving the long-term problem that you are in blame mode is very much like solving the long-term problem that you have a bad temper, or the long-term problem that you have trouble with controlling lust or anything else. It's sanctification. It's the spiritual disciplines and the grace of God, and mostly time.
She's back.
Yes, I know. I saw her. So, I was going to finish answering your question.
My fault.
But it's a combination. For some people it's changed. For some people it's just the family culture.
But do you think it's easy to be changed?
Well, again, it depends on how deeply ingrained it is. It's harder to change if it's part of your temperament. But it's not any harder to change than someone with a really bad temper getting their temper under control. I would say one of the, so again, if you go study just the process of sanctification, of how God uses spiritual disciplines in our life and everything else. It's spiritual disciplines, it's the grace of God, and it is time. Those three things together solve problems. A problem like this is not something that changes overnight. And so, look, one of the things that's really important, some of you guys heard your kids using the phrase easy to please and hard to satisfy. Right? God is easy to please and hard to satisfy. He does not rest until we are perfect. But we do not have to be perfect in order for Him to be happy with us. Right?
But is He already satisfied with us?
It depends on His perspective or our perspective. He's not satisfied with where we are right now, but since He's outside of time, and for Him we already are at the end, He's happy with us.
But when we accept Jesus, He's already satisfied with us because He can see our future. Right?
Again, He is satisfied with who we are.
In the future.
He is not satisfied with where we are right now, but He's already got a plan to deal with it. Right. The key to being easy to please and hard to satisfy, what that means is your goal should be, for this particular thing, your goal should be to get to where you're in solution mode all the time, and it's habitual, right? But that's not going to happen overnight. So if this month, there were 100 problems that came up, and 90 of those problems I was in blame mode, then I need to not be satisfied. But if last month it was 95, and this month is 90, I should be pleased. I'm moving in the right direction. So for any of these changes that are going to be long term, you really have to focus when you're when it comes to self-esteem, when it comes to be happy with yourself and everything else, you need to be looking at progress. You need to be looking at, I'm moving in the right direction, rather than where you are. But if the question is, can I stop yet? Are you perfect yet? Then no, right? So easy to please, hard to satisfy.
Give yourself grace too.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it can be changed, but it's not going to be changed overnight. Right? What time is it?
Do we want to take a break, short break? Or
So how do you guys want to do it? So we can take a short break. Strictly speaking, there's another half hour left. So do you want to take a break and then do another half hour? Keep going. Do you want to stop here?
30 minutes.
Oh, okay, let's continue then. A lot of them have other activities.
Yeah. Okay.
I missed the first few minutes. I don't know where these two modes, how these two modes came from. Is there any third mode, like happy mode,
Comfort.
satisfied mode, or they don't look at the future or don't look at the
Yes.
past?
Yeah. So I don't think we're going to get there in another half an hour, so I'll just jump ahead. Where are we? Is a true topic of discussion. When we get down to here, in solution mode, you're thinking about the problem. With blame mode, it's all about the people. And there is a distinction that is more fundamental than the difference between solution mode and blame mode, because these only have to do with where we have problems. There's a more fundamental difference, which is the difference between being focused on people and being focused on a problem, which you can think of as relation, right? Blame mode is one of the relational modes. But there's plenty others, including comfort mode. If we were going to be here for 5 hours and get to the 50th slide, not everything that we think of as problems are what I would call a problem, because we also have wounds. If I'm a 10-year-old child whose father has just died, there is nothing that anybody can say that will solve the problem, right? That's not a problem that anyone's going to solve. That is a wound that is going to take time to heal, right? And one thing is, there's an immense amount of damage that gets done by very well-meaning people, mostly men, but not all men, but by people who who come to someone who is grieving, and they go into solution mode rather than comfort. And they try to solve the problem, and they start giving advice, about you should do this so you'll feel better, and you can do an immense amount of problem. Here's another example that's funnier. And again, this tends to be more husbands than wives. Guys tend to be more problem solvers temperamentally. Women are much better, as a general rule, at being aware of relationships. And when guys go into solution mode, we are not good at multitasking, right? We can concentrate on one thing at a time. And also, most guys, in order to pay attention to whether the way we're about to phrase something is going to accidentally hurt somebody's feelings or not, we have to concentrate pretty hard, right? So we can only concentrate on one thing at a time, and if we're concentrating on the problem, there's not anything left over to be concentrating on not hurting anybody's feelings, right? So two guys who are trying to solve a problem can be, this tends to mystify women. Two guys, they can be really rude to each other. They can call each other stupid. They can, a lot of times they can yell at each other. And then once the problem is solved, they go just back to being perfectly good friends. Because, you know, that was just business, you know, or whatever. Because we do the one thing at a time. So I was many years ago, I was at a father and child campout. And a couple of the men there were newly married. And the reason they were there is they were trying to form relationships with their new stepchildren. Right? So you've got these young men who've just gotten married, and the kids all went to bed, and the fathers were sitting around the campfire at like 11 o'clock. And one of these young guys is like, my wife, sometimes I think she's crazy. He says, she will come home from work and she'll start telling me about some problem she's having at work. And before he could go any further, two of the older men who had been married a long time both jumped in and interrupted him and said, please tell us you do not give her advice on how to solve the problem. He was like, well, yeah. Oh, no, that's wrong. She wants you to say, oh, I'm so sorry. She wants sympathy. She's like, really? Because he couldn't, why would anyone ever mention a problem for any reason other than to solve it? Right? The thing of it is, if I put comfort mode up here, right? And so you're looking at the problem, person. In comfort mode, you're supposed to be thinking about the person. Also, let me just jump ahead. When you're in solution mode, the prevailing emotion is no emotion. Let's all calm down. Let's think about the problem, right? When you are in blame mode, it's anger and fear. When you're in comfort mode, it is compassion, right? So if someone's expecting comfort, they're not expecting you to be calm and analytical and not feeling emotion. They're expecting you to be upset on their behalf, right? So this poor girl has come home, right, with some problem at work. So she's going to tell her husband about it so he can say, she can feel better. And instead, he starts explaining what she needs to do differently. Now, if I'm in solution mode, and you tell me that 100% of the problem is being caused by my behavior, is that good news or bad news?
Good news.
Why?
You can solve it.
Because I can solve it. Right? If it's other people's behavior, I've got a problem because it's really hard to make other people change. But if it's me, awesome. Now I can fix it. If I'm in blame mode and you tell me that 100% of the problem is caused by my behavior, is that good news or bad news?
That's a disaster.
That is very bad news. Now the problem is, if someone's expecting comfort, if they're expecting compassion and for you to be focused on them, and instead they get calm, unemotional analysis, right? They do not assume that you're in solution mode because it's supposed to be about the person. They assume you're in blame mode.
That's my question, because the solution mode that you mentioned about is like focused on the problem. That's guy's strengths. But
for most men,
for
yeah.
most the guy,
Yeah.
but for women, we are relation animals, so we kind of focus on people. So sometimes, I don't say other women, but for me, it's easier for me to fall in the blame mode because I focus on the person.
Yes.
You know, I think anything wrong is because the person wrong, or either me or either, I don't say it's all other people's wrong, but either me or others. So my focus always easy to fall into the person rather than the problem. So that will be hard because if person wrong, how to solve that person or solve
So-
me, my problem.
So the place where this gets trickiest is when we have a problem in our human relationships,
Yeah.
right? Because it's still a problem. And even though it has to do with the relationships, the problem is not going to get solved without you analyzing the problem, figuring out what's going on. You have to address it in solution mode, but two things. Number one, problems in human relationships usually come with wounds, right? So if all it is it's a problem, if you've got a disagreement on how to manage the money, then you guys may be able to sit and talk through it carefully for 3 hours and go solution mode and get it figured all out,
Yeah.
right? If the problem is that the husband was unfaithful, right? You can address the problem of what changes the husband is going to make so that he won't be led into temptation in the future, but in the meantime, the wound is going to take a while to heal, right? So you can use the solution mode to deal with the part of the issue that is a problem to be solved. But a husband who starts going all solution mode, an unfaithful husband who starts going all solution mode and saying, well, look, what good does it do to dwell on the past? I'm not going to do it anymore. Let's just move forward. This is not going to go well, right?
Yeah, for why?
Because it's not just a solution problem. He has caused a wound, right? The other issue with the relational mode is that when guys are in solution mode, they tend to be emotionally clumsy. They will do things like say, well, that's stupid, right? At some idea that the wife is, and all they're doing is they're thinking about the idea. And if he's an honest guy, he's just as willing to come up with an idea on his own and then say, oh wait, that's stupid, right? So guys have to work very hard at being in relational solution mode and remembering to be careful and everything about what they say because they're having to think about two things at once. But when you go to marital counseling and so forth, then you get things like premarital counseling, and you get things like the rules for fighting fair. Right? The Sunday school teacher at Sugar Creek this morning was mentioned marital counseling that he does, and he tells his young couples that if there's an argument that until they can use the 3 C's, they're not ready to talk about it, which is calm, concise, and clear. What all these rules are is they are ways to keep you in solution mode when dealing with a relational solution, with a relational problem, because you are right. It is so easy to suddenly find yourself in blame mode because it's about the people. So those things make it difficult, that it's easy to switch into blame mode and that you usually have problems and wounds mixed together. And the problems have to be solved and the wounds have to be healed, but the way you solve problems is not the way you heal wounds, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to go back and forth, so it's quite as messy.
You know, like in the corporate world, I mean, you kind of experience managers who are
In blame
mode and also in blame mode.
Yes, it is not just, actually, I didn't learn this from Scripture, although once I learned it, it helped a lot to realize that there were a bunch of scriptures that were related to each other that I hadn't really realized it, right? But I learned it in business.
Very
I'm,
common.
so, I am a consultant professionally, so I have worked on projects for over 100 companies, and the first thing I do when I go to a new client is I try to figure out, is this company a blame company or a solution company? Because the two cultures are radically different, and you can usually tell within a week the difference between A company where everybody focuses primarily on solution mode and a company that's in blame mode, it's just palpable.
Right.
And if it's a company that's in blame mode, unless I'm there to help them change their culture to solution mode, their problems are not likely to get solved, and I don't work too hard to keep them as a client.
Just chasing your own tail.
Yeah, because I'm going to put in a huge amount of trouble and we're not going to get very far. It's not going to be a satisfying client.
So to work with people who are having a blame mode, you mentioned that their emotional roots are anger and fear. So is there effective ways to deal with the anger and fear?
Hang on, I'm going to go to that
That will
slide,
be our
which is
next
a long way
slide.
down.
Anger control.
In conclusion, I think the men need to know more about comfort mode.
Yes.
Then women need to learn more solution mode.
Generally,
Yeah.
yes. There are a lot of things that say, actually, I want to get back to
You can only focus on one thing.
One slide.
Let him focus.
I just have too many slides and my eyes aren't good enough to see. Okay, here we go. So, one of the differences between blame mode and solution mode is that solution mode is not naturally contagious, and blame mode is. So, if you have 5 people in a room trying to talk about a problem, and 2 of them are in blame mode and 3 are in solution mode, usually after half an hour, you will have maybe 4 people who are in blame mode and 1 guy who is checked out. Okay? And the reason we didn't get around to talking about amygdala hijacking or anything else, but people who are in blame mode attack. When you feel attacked, you get defensive.
Yeah.
You react either with anger, usually, or with fear, which means welcome to blame mode, right? So it's very difficult if you have one person. Look, if there's I will not keep somebody on my team who functions mostly in blame mode because they will destroy my team, right? I will find some other project to pawn them off on if I have to. I'll think who it is that's really screwed me over most recently, and I'll put them on his team. No. Yes.
Thank you for keeping me.
So you assist.
Defense mode, so it's kind of part of defense mode.
So when
Yeah, when you're
we feel attacked, there's a part of our brain called the amygdala. It's right above the brainstem. We share it with lizards. Practically every kind of animal has it.
Some people easily trigger out
Do I have it?
defense mode, even if you are just talking about a problem.
Yes, because people who are in blame mode assume everyone else is.
It's attacking them.
Yes, yes. So you get. Here's an example of a conversation that I had when I was in high school. We're just going all over the slides. I can't get to the slides fast enough. So there's a lot of noise being made about the problem of rapes on college campuses, right? And when I was in college in the late 80s, there was a lot of noise being made. If I sat down to talk with Isabel and Mabel, who are about to be freshmen in college next year, right? If I sat down and talked to them and started telling them things that they could do, and I said, here's what you need to do. If you do this, this, and this, and you don't do this, this, and this, you can reduce your chance of getting raped on campus to pretty much 0. if there is, sitting and listening, an activist who lives in blame mode, they will say, how dare you say that it's a woman's own fault if she gets raped? How dare you blame the victim? Right? Because what they hear me say is, if a woman gets raped, that's because she didn't do all these things, because if she does those things, she has no chance of getting raped. Right? I'm not saying that at all, because I don't care about fault or blame. I am trying to help these young ladies who have a personal problem that they are personally at risk, know things that they can do, that are under their control, that doesn't depend on anybody else, that will help solve their problem. And what this person hears is blame. And they get all upset. So if you're dealing with someone who is in blame mode, anything that you say that constitutes a suggestion that they are part of the problem, if you try, what you are trying to say is, you can be part of the solution. What they hear is, you are the reason for the problem. And the focus of people who are in blame mode is not, so for solution mode, the idea is to make the future better for the people who have the problem. For blame mode, what those people want to do is they want to make the future bad for the people who caused the problem. Right? So when they hear you suggest that they're part of the problem, they interpret that as an attack. Because if they were saying that you were part of the problem, it's because they wanted to destroy you. Because that's what they're doing in blame mode. People in blame mode interpret what you say as if you're in blame mode, which makes it really, really difficult to address problems.
Then how do you
With
talk
those people.
with her then?
So
I was about to ask.
there are people who have the skill, and it is a skill, they have the skill of being able to sit in a room, you see this in business, and these people make tons of money. People who have the ability to sit in a room where you have a bunch of people who are in blame mode, and by the time they're through, 10 minutes later, everybody's in solution mode. That they can turn it around the other direction. There are not many people who have that skill, and they make a whole bunch of money.
Let's learn it.
That's right, yeah. Then make a lot of money.
It is almost entirely your tone of voice and your body language. The only way to get somebody out of blame mode is to convince them that they are safe. And you cannot convince anyone that they are safe by telling them that they are safe.
Can you tell them in advance, like, I'm not blaming you?
No.
You,
That's it.
That's an alarm.
you can try, but you have to understand the numbers, are imprecise, but it's essentially true. About 10%, whenever you have conversation, communication going on between two people, about 10% of the message that's delivered is the words, about 30% is the tone of voice, and about 70% is body language. You can say, I'm not mad, all you want. If your body language is saying you're angry, the body language doesn't lie. And most people know that instinctively, right? So, if you're going to get somebody out of blame mode, your non-verbal communication is going to have to project safety. Right? And that can be learned, but very few people can do that instinctively. So most of us do have to learn it. So, if you have someone who's in blame mode all the time, I can take them through this course, right? All that will do is convince them that it would be better to be in solution mode rather than blame mode. But when they sit down in the room with you, they have to believe that you are not in blame mode. They have to believe that they are safe with you, and your body language and your tone of voice will tell them whether they are safe or not. Now, if they are in blame mode all the time, it doesn't matter. right? They interpret everything you say as blame anyway. But you have to make them safe, and that does not depend on what you say. It depends on all the nonverbal communication. This is an excellent, excellent book if you want to chase that further. And it's totally focused on the business world, actually.
Yeah, that's why I personally brought it up.
But it holds for anything. I don't think he uses the phrase solution and blame mode, but that's essentially what that book's about, really. So
I think it would be good for teenager to read it.
I think so. It's a very good book. We can keep talking as long as you want. It is 5 minutes till 4. We could break up the formal thing if you wanted. If people are going to stick around for dinner, we can talk over dinner.
Did you prepare dinner?
No.
That's okay.
You know,
We can order some. The one you're having dinner.
every time we had the kids, there was dinner. I didn't even bother to look. So it's
You have faith.
does anyone have any feelings? She's ready.
That's problem.
I'm not blaming you.
Fish bad water. Fish bad water.
Well, why don't we go ahead and stop? And as far as the formal thing, but obviously we can keep talking as long as you want to talk.
Yeah, so I think if we try to teach our kids something important, there must be feel we are in the solution, right? So we need to create a safe environment for them. So what's your suggestion we will say or do? For those kids who are not good relationship with their parents or whatsoever, if like for teenagers they are like rebellion or they tend to think the parents all what they want is like control them or something.
So the first thing is we have to get out of blame mode ourselves. There's a big difference between teenagers and little children. Because if you're dealing with little children, if they do something wrong and you don't punish them right away, then by the time you get around to punishing them, they don't remember what it's about. So you'll hear people say, don't ever punish your children when you're angry. With little children, with little children, it's so important to punish them right away that that's actually more important than waiting until you're angry. But once the kids have gotten old enough to where they've gotten some permanent